Welcome everyone to this little power purchase agreement update. This is all part of London Climate Action Week and helping to just create more of an understanding across the board, and helping to particularly create more of an understanding of power purchase agreements and how they may or may not be part of your energy solution going forward. This is all part of the Renewable Power for London theme within the London Council's climate programme as well. For those of you who may not be aware of that programme, it's a broad brush programme addressing climate change concerns and issues. Renewable Power for London is just one of the, I think, 7 themes across the board. So I think, Ashwin, very kindly, you've put together a bit of an agenda for us, haven't you? There we go. So we've already started the first part, but you can see we're going to very kindly, Helen Dewhurst from EY has come along just to explain some of the work that they've been doing with a small group of councils looking at PPAs. We can talk a little bit about next steps, and then there'll be an opportunity for a bit of Q&A and general chit chat at the end. If I could ask you just to go on mute for the time being, that would be helpful. There was a little bit of background noise there, but do feel free to unmute for the Q&A. That's the important bit. So there's not too many people on the call, so I do think it's worth going through some very swift introductions, if I may. So I'll start. Chris Smith, I'm Assistant Director for Estates and Decarbonisation in Barnet, and I also chair Renewable Power for London and the Power Purchase Agreement work stream, along with colleagues from Westminster Council. Ashwin.
Hi everyone, Ashwin Patel. I'm a climate change programme manager in the climate unit at London Councils. So I work on the Renewable Power for London theme, but also the low carbon development theme. And I've been helping to kind of with some project management capacity and support with the London Club PPA work that's been going on.
Thanks, Ashwin. I'm going to go alphabetical order. So Christopher Owen.
Yeah, so Chris Owen, I'm the energy manager at London Borough of Waltham Forest. So yeah, just a general interest in PPAs. We procure our energy through laser at the moment, but yeah, interested to see what's out there. We haven't joined into this conversation previously, I don't believe. So yeah, that's us.
Thanks, Chris. Ciara Hansen, hope that's the right pronunciation. Probably not.
Oh, yeah, no, that'll do. That's fine. Thanks, Ciara. And I work with Chris at Waltham Forest. I'm in the climate team and working with Chris to work out how we can do more PPAs.
Nice to meet you. Inora.
Hi everyone. I'm Inora Robin. I work at the GLA and I'm the program manager for our GLA Group Power Purchase Agreement program. So keen interest in the topic as well.
Hi Inora, nice to see you. I'm going to skip Helen because Helen can introduce herself in a second, if I may. Bob Fiddick.
Good afternoon all. I'm Bob Fiddick. I'm the Energy and Sustainability Team Leader over here at Croydon Council.
Thanks, nice to have you here, Bob. Henrietta Cook.
Hi, yes, I am Henrietta Cook. I work at Haringey Council. I work mostly on their district heating projects. I'm here kind of out of interest, really, to see what this is all about.
Nice to have you aboard, Henrietta. And we can talk about heat networks as well at some other point, I'm sure. So that'd be good. Katrin Bengalova.
Hi everyone.
Thanks. There are many of you, Katrin.
Apologies for that. Ashwin and I are sharing the same meeting room, which became clear to everyone. Hi all, I'm Katrin. I'm the Climate Comms Officer here at London Council, so supporting our climate unit with all the comms work, and Ashwin in particular with the renewable power comms pieces.
Thanks, Katrin, and nice to meet you because we've never met before, so that's
nice to meet you all.
Leanne Kenny.
Hi all, my name is Leanne Kenny. I'm the Energy Manager at the London Borough of Barnet and Dagenham. So we procure our energy through laser and haven't really sort of looked at PPAs so far.
Okay, I'm encouraged that this is definitely the right group. Louise Costa.
Hi, pretty much the same as Leanne, but at London Borough of Camden, actually. So we have been involved in this group before in the group workshops, but yeah, just interested in sort of what's next for PPAs and local authorities.
Great stuff. Thanks. Louise Costa.
That was just me.
Oh, I apologise. I apologise, Louise. You can tell I was distracted by names further down the list. Graham Lowe.
Hi everyone. Graham Lowe, Head of Energy and Sustainability at the City of London. We've got a PPA.
Yes, you have, Graham, and an impressive one it is too.
Well, I mean, I like to think so, but others may differ.
Luda, I'm not going to try and pronounce your name if you'll forgive me, your surname.
Absolutely fine. Hi everyone, I'm Luda Pasichnichenko. I'm Energy Project Manager at London Borough of Hounslow. We had separate meeting with Chris Smith and we would like to join PPA Club.
Yeah, nice to see you again, Luda. I hope I don't get this wrong. And Wiki?
Hello guys, you did pronounce it, that's my last name, Ifeanyi Wike, part of London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. We're in the middle of our energy procurements for the new term, and I'm interested to learn more about PPAs as we currently use laser as well.
Okay, nice to have you on board, thanks. David Punter.
Good afternoon, and Energy Operations Manager at Islington Council. Been dallying with thinking about PPAs for many years. Pored over the Green Solver report that was previously published, and looking at potentials for sleeving in PPAs into our volume.
Great stuff, thanks. Paul Keenlyside.
Hello, Paul Keenlyside, supporting the London Borough of Lambeth on their decarbonisation strategy. Thanks.
Thanks. Philippa Illingworth.
Hi, I'm Philippa. I'm the Head of Infrastructure at Old Oak Parkwell Development Corporation. We've got quite a lot of different projects going on in our Parkwell Industrial Estate, and I'm just keen to learn a bit more about PPA as a potential solution. Thank you.
Thanks, Philippa. Saini Kalpana.
Hi everyone, I'm Cal Saini and working for London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham on the managing the housing communal landlord supply. And alongside me, I work with Sebastian, who works on the corporate side. Currently, we are working on our energy procurement for 25-30 and using laser at the moment. So we're doing all the benchmarking analysis and options appraisal and looking at different options at the moment. And PPA, we are interested in PPA and seeing how that can help us meet the net zero targets as well.
Thanks, Carl. Hopefully we can help with the problem.
Okay.
This may well be the wrong way around, so I apologise if it is. Shabazz Khan.
Hi everyone. I am Energy Strategy Manager at London Borough of Havering, and we procure through laser. And I want to know and I need more information about PPAs. Thank you.
Thanks. You did go a little bit robotic then, so I don't know if it might be worth leaving the call and coming back on because your connection wasn't brilliant. But nice to have you on board. Phil Triggs.
Yes, hi everyone. Phil Triggs from Westminster. I'm the Tri-Borough Director for Treasury and Pensions.
Thanks, Phil. Bhavina Vincent.
Hi everyone. Bhavina from Council. We have Bob in the call who will be leading on the PPA. I'm just here to listen and learn.
No problem. And finally, but definitely not least, Yasir Khan.
Afternoon, everyone. Yasir Khan, Net Zero Energy Manager at London Borough of Newham. And just like a lot of other people on the call, we also procure our energy through laser. But we've also been working on quite a number of community-owned solar projects as well as our own council-owned installations. So quite interested in what we can see in terms of PPAs.
Thanks. And interesting to hear about community energy. Community energy is now part of Renewable Power for London as well. So we're trying to push that agenda across the city a bit more. So we might have further conversations, I suspect. So welcome everyone. And it does seem it's all largely energy managers on the call, not exclusively, but largely, which is helpful. So I think you are the right people to hopefully get some value from today's session. So the route that we've taken so far across London is, I think originally 6 councils, which then expanded to 7 and then 8, informally agreed to try and work together to potentially procure a PPA as a formed club. And I joined that group informally, I think about 18 months ago now, I forget. And we were just having lots and lots of conversations about whether a PPA was a viable prospect, should we be doing it, was it the right kind of answer? And those conversations, as I'm sure you may be having them yourselves, they went a little bit around in circles because we didn't know enough about PPAs to really make a decision. It's very easy to come across things that sound a bit scary and a bit risky. And so we would discuss them, we would agree that we would go away and have a bit more of a think, and then we'd come back and then we'd have another discussion. And that went on for a while until we realised that what we needed to be doing was really getting some more advice. We'd already had some advice from Laser, and there was nothing wrong with that advice at all. It was perfectly good. But their understanding only went a certain way. And when we started to talk about things like virtual PPAs, that's not something I don't think that Laser was certainly familiar with at the time. We analysed the Green Solver report that, as I remember, Hackney had commissioned, which was really for their own PPA advice, but they were kind enough to share that and expand it to the group. That also only really talked about physical PPAs, and Helen will talk to you about the difference between these two in a second, I'm sure. But what we were hearing from other people was that virtual PPAs could well be the way forward and the dominant kind of product in the market. So we realised we didn't know enough about virtual PPAs. So we agreed collectively across the 8 councils to pull together and commission EY to advise us on predominantly virtual PPAs, but also just give us a bit more background and a bit more detail into PPAs. Some advice on the way the market is and the way the market's going, some advice on what we'd have to do to get a PPA in place, all the kind of good early consultancy advice that you would expect. And Helen was right in the middle of that with her colleague Phil Dominy, and we culminated in a session for the 8 councils with senior finance procurement leaders and, in some cases, in fact in a lot of cases, elected members. And we all provisionally agreed that we would continue to look into a virtual PPA, and we would aim towards a procurement sometime later this year. That was the provisional agreement. Now, since then, and I won't spoil the end of the meeting, but since then we've had a little bit of a rethink about timescales, but we are still, in principle, in favour of a PPA and still working towards a procurement. It's now just a matter of when, rather than if, although we are still keeping our options open. The 8 councils, just to clarify, because I didn't mention those, is obviously Barnet, Westminster, Hackney, Hammersmith and Fulham, Kingston, Haringey, Southwark and Brent. Now, we haven't signed anything. We haven't even got a formed agreement between those 8 councils, but in principle, those are the 8 councils that we're going to take forward a club. So that's where we've got to so far. The objective today is to really start to share what we've learned with the broader London community, so that you have an idea of what we've been talking about. The club itself is not necessarily exclusive, so we could bring other people on board within that club, but it would have to be in agreement with everybody in the club and make sure that that didn't introduce risk. And we'd also have to think about how much we've invested so far in the club. So more likely would be that we, if other people are interested in a PPA, we would probably form another club with councils that haven't already signed up and move forward with them. But what we are definitely keen to do is to share as much information as possible across London now about PPAs and about what we've learned so far. So even if you decide to go off individually, you'll at least know a little bit more and be a bit more prepared. So that's how we've got to where we are now. I'll hand over to Helen, who can start to give you an idea of what the advice that she provided for us with Phil, and then we'll come back and open it up really to a Q&A and start to discuss what you think. So Helen, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, that's really helpful. And it's a pleasure to be here today. And it was a pleasure to work with the club while we worked on finalising a strategy for you. Or, well, not really finalising a strategy so much as providing 3 recommendations, which we will look at later on. It's one of my slides. And really useful background from... Oh, I should also start with the fact that, yeah, Chris very kindly introduced me, but I work as part of the energy infrastructure team at EY. Within that, we have a sort of sub-team that focuses on corporate energy purchasing. All of these good options that you see in front of you here, but specifically offsite PPAs is the thing that we help transact. So when we provide advice on a strategy, we consider all of these different options, but then implementation of PPAs is something that it's almost impossible to do on your own. So we would guide you through that process, and would be delighted to help a London Council's club to do the same. So yes, this is a little overview. Just got 9 slides on what the sort of thought process was behind the 3 recommendations that we got to, which I'll show at the end, and a little bit of background as well on PPAs themselves, so you come away with a bit of knowledge on what for example, virtual versus physical PPA is. So yeah, so Chris did a good job of providing some context there. We were given the remit of understanding PPA options in the context of all of the green energy buying options for corporations and also public sector entities. These, I'm not going to entertain you with some PowerPoint karaoke and read out what all these dots are. You can see it here. I think it's pretty clear, but just to sort of let you know that PPAs are being considered alongside other options as well. And if you entered a club, it wouldn't be that you would have to sort of either do a PPA or buy a green tariff. It's very much a solution as part of a whole strategy. So now, what is a PPA? This is the sort of fundamental takeaway from the whole thing. It's a long-term contract where you purchase directly from a generator. This can be on-site or off-site, but just to emphasise that either is equally additional, and the same thing with virtual and physical PPAs as well. They're just different types of the same thing. But the great thing about a PPA is that you are adding to the grid. So you're creating demand that will directly feed into new renewable assets being built. It's an operational expenditure rather than a capital expenditure. So procurement rather than investment. And what that means is that it's a cash flow. So you're not committing upfront to anything. It sort of acts in the place of your energy bill. So you pay for it out of what it's a yield for a long-term energy saving, and it's fundamentally at its core they were originally designed as price hedges rather than an environmental tool. Although that's not to say that the sort of equal or close to number 2 benefit is that it's there's a direct and verifiable relationship to a new build energy asset. So it's it's also a very it's the kind of best option for in terms of green credentials for all of the green energy options. And Regos are currently trading at the close comparison, another option that companies often go for if they can't sign a PPA or they decide it's too complicated, they don't have, for example, a club to join, is buying Regos. They're currently at £16 a megawatt hour. They're unlikely to reduce in price. I was actually just at a meeting this morning with the climate group. Not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but they brought together a few companies who are scratching their heads about what to do about this high price, and structurally why the market has gone this way. But PPAs include Regos, so you don't have this problem. You would effectively save that £16 per megawatt hour generated or purchased by you, and it's a great way to certify that you are actually buying this power directly. The advantages of entering a clubbed PPA arrangement, which you would probably do as part of this group, is that you have more bargaining power, particularly if the council's club, potential council club took the majority of PPA volume. It would reduce the risk of project delays. The developer wouldn't be dependent on another buyer. So you'd be able to, in exchange for that de-risking, the developer will be able to offer you a better price. And there's big reputational benefits from participating in a club. Well, I noticed we have Graham on the call. Maybe he can contribute to that later on about his experience of announcing one of these deals as a group. For some reason, well, I suppose it's an obvious reason in a way, but the more you get more press if there's more of you announcing it, and so the reputational benefits are very strong, and it's also cheaper. So that's it's probably quite obvious, but basically the overall price is higher, but because it's divided by a large number of people per council entering the club, you would pay less. For example, for things like advisory fees, for the so legal and financial commercial advisory fees per council, that would be lower. The aggregation effect is lower. So typically, if we just act for one company, you need a letter of credit. If you're not already, if you already don't have a credit rating, if you're not credit worthy institution, that's actually much less of a problem. Banks see portfolio buyers very favourably, because the risk of default of everyone defaulting on their payments is much lower. So you get that kind of risk exposure profile lowered, which is great. And also project economics do decrease to a certain, after a certain point, after a certain size, that the benefits from this decrease, but certainly compared to if you just transacted, for example, for 10 gigawatt hours on your own, which might be a typical volume you'd expect from one council to commit, that's quite difficult to find in the UK market. You might not have so many options when you go out, when you sort of bid to the market and get the prices back from developers. So if you have 50, the sweet spot's 50 to 100, and that's something that you could achieve easily in a club context. The next thing I wanted to run through was just what the different types of PPA are. The two main ones that Chris also mentioned were sleeved or physical PPAs and virtual PPAs. So we'll go through sleeved and physical first. Essentially, what you see here is sort of ignore the many boxes and arrows, but you're making two contracts. So one, you keep your retail supply agreement in place, but contract directly with the project. So that's a new generating asset. And then you also separately keep your retail supply agreement and then shape this through the utility. And so you have 2 back-to-back PPA contracts, and the balance power depends on the actual asset performance. So you're less exposed to well, you're more exposed to the market prices, and also there's this risk involved with the retail supply agreement having to be renewed every 3 years. So typically PPAs last between 10 to 15 years, and so you're looking at having to renew the retail supply agreement 3 or 4 times in that period, and that can be quite tedious. And a lot of developers now actually don't even want to enter into that because there's no real benefit for them, and it's quite a big hassle. So yeah, it's more complicated. There are more contracts to negotiate. It's more lengthy. It's more costly. But you are buying energy directly from a specific project. So there's very straightforward accounting treatment. It's not a lease or a financial instrument, and you can be a bit more flexible on the pricing structure. So you can do a floating discount market or fixed flat nominal, and I think accounting teams find it easier to get their head around this structure. But in a club context, and Chris mentioned this as well in his introduction very helpfully, it really does work better when you have the flexibility to negotiate one contract and then cookie cut that across the different members of a group. So the beauty of it is that you can actually cut the contracts according to different values that the club, or in this case councils, agree. So for example, if council A has significantly higher volume than B and C, they could, for example, contribute more towards the transaction costs as a proportion of the energy they need to take, and then take, say, 50%, and then B and C can take 25% each. So it's all very fair, and you all retain your retail supply agreements, so you don't have to align on that. You all sign with the same project, and you all share the same actually, sorry, you don't share the same utility. You can have totally different utility companies providing you. So yeah, and there's no balancing responsibility. This is another advantage that's passed on to the generator and project owner. And then you can also even cover consumption, which is under landlord billing control. And I think this is a really important one to highlight for councils, because one of the things that came up quite a lot in the strategy consultation was the difficulty of, assets that aren't directly under council control. So certain categories of energy consumption, for example, schools, housing, council, any council facilities, that's a big strength for the virtual PPA arrangement. The thing that is slightly tricky is the special accounting treatment, because it's treated as a financial derivative. But as mentioned, there are ways of getting around this. It just requires a little bit of education to your accounting and treasury team, but it's something that you can get ongoing support for a relatively low cost, especially split across the group. And actually, it's not. I mean, it's becoming fairly established practice, and it's particularly in the UK. And it's not anything. It doesn't detract from the value of the PPA. It doesn't move the cost up and down. It just adds a layer of additional thought into your end reporting. And yes, I think one thing I would like everyone to take away from this, the comparison between the two structures, which is really important and is a common misunderstanding, is the additionality and the benefit to the environment from both of these structures is exactly the same. So they're both clean sources of energy, and in both cases you get kind of direct credit for entering into the contract. So the energy, I think just helpful quickly to go through thought process that the councils went through to try and select which energy consumption categories they wanted to include within the PPA. So we ran a RAG analysis on the different categories here. You can see schools, leisure centres, housing, streetlights and corporate. Those are the sort of main 5 that we identified. And results are, the overall results are here, although we did some sort of really in-depth category-based like qualitative analysis that went along with this as well. So for example, for leisure centres, some of the pros are that if it's in-house, you'll have direct control. It's very favourable politically. And also the leisure centres have high energy use, which is quite evenly spread across evenings, weekends, and sort of all year round. So it's not seasonal necessarily. The cons are that it's not in-house, so therefore it's, you know, indirect control, more complex. There's and it was a bit more uncertain with this category, for example, where the kind of curve for energy efficiency measures was, you know, how far different leisure centres were along that. Some leisure centres have retrofitted energy efficiency measures, some have been newly built and are extremely energy efficient, but increasing investment in this space is uncertain. So the kind of decarbonisation versus electrification, for example, is difficult to forecast, and it's hard to know how to hedge with this category. So yes, so a couple of councils in this case wanted to include leisure centres in the PPA, but 4 were undecided and 3 said definitely let's exclude. That's just one example, won't go through all 5 of them, but just to give you a flavour for the kind of discussion that went on, and the kind of category level that as a council you need to start thinking about if you want to include, if you want to sort of contribute your energy into the PPA. It's not actually so much, it's not so straightforward as to say, oh, you know, we're going to include all of our energy. It's what proportion of your energy and which parts of your energy ecosystem are you going to tackle? And you know, often different teams manage all of these different categories. So that also, you know, just from a pure logistics and admin point of view, dealing with the right people to manage the right contracts and conversations is really, really important, and kind of making this as easy as possible for you was a big conclusion, I think, that came out of all the discussions for us. And then this is the last slide. So just to summarise what was advised, I suppose, coming out of all of this category analysis, 3 scenarios were felt to be possible. So there's the sort of small taster PPA scenario, where 1 PPA is transacted, clubbing together a conservative total. This was kind of this was 60% of just the green categories, so categories that councils felt were very much achievable. They were comfortable with you know, what their forecast consumption was, and they could go into that, you know, committing 60% of their energy consumption, no problem at all. And the sort of considerations are listed in the grey box there. The second scenario is where 1 PPA is transacted at a time by clubbing it together a conservative consumption, but then kind of over time building up more energy consumption, and this basically hedges the risk of maybe entering the PPA at slightly the wrong time, or, you know, getting getting stakeholders internally on board with the concept of it, starting small and then developing this project over time, and also allows two different technologies to balance each other out. So you can have one wind asset and one solar asset, so they generate nice and they kind of provide an even profile over time. And then the third scenario is the I don't want to call it the most ambitious one, because I think entering into PPA full stop is a great thing to do, and if one council group can pull it off, then that's fantastic. But this would be the most full-on option, should we say, where two PPAs were sort of both transacted at the same time, and to deliver a strong price and supply security, covering 60% of the council's load across qualified categories. So that is all of green and all of amber. So basically most of the council's energy consumption. And I'm not going to talk through these slides, but just to sort of illustrate what the analysis looked like in terms of what we call an even shape to the generation. This is what it looks like. So scenarios 2 and 3, and scenario 2 was selected, so probably good to dwell on this one. But the green is where the consumption would be at, and the solar and the wind PPAs, and how that fits into that overall demand, to meet that green energy demand. And either this is done, as I said, one at a time or together. But it ultimately achieves the same goal. So thank you very much. I would be delighted to take questions at the end, and afterwards as well, if you want to email through.
Thanks, Helen. I've noticed a couple of questions going in the chat, and I've been adding just a couple of things which I hope are helpful for people to read while we're here, but I'm sure there'll be some stuff that we can draw out in Q&A now. But just before we get to Q&A, just to let you know where we are with the club. So Barnet and Westminster now co-chair the Club of 8. Nat Evans has got experience in pulling together City of London's PPA previously. So she and her team are ideal for pulling together the procurement. We got to the point where we were going to aim for a procurement in September this year. But because of the election, because of uncertainty over Great British Energy, because of a number of different variables, we will probably now, if we do decide to go ahead, and it's all subject to consultancy and legal advice, but if we do decide to go ahead, we will probably aim for May or September 2025, realistically. That doesn't mean another club couldn't form concurrently and in parallel and aim for a similar timescale. And equally, it doesn't mean that you couldn't leave it a bit later, but we've all got in our minds our 2030 deadline predominantly across London for decarbonising councils. So that's where we are at the moment. Now that slowdown allows us time also to look to the market and see what other products might be coming onto the market, because the PPA market is growing, and it could be that frameworks could offer a PPA access option. Who knows? So we need to do that concurrently at the same time, and then we can start to make better informed decisions. But I think the big one is the election and Great British Energy for me, which just means we have to draw breath for a moment. As I've said, what we'll do concurrently with that group still pushing forward their own thinking is we will broaden the inclusion of other councils just generally into talking about PPAs and keeping everybody informed. So if another group does decide to spin off, great. And actually, Honora, just noticing you coming back on camera, we're also talking to the GLA, we're talking to TfL about their work on PPAs. So we're learning from each other in that respect, and just trying to share the love really across the public sector. So that's where we are. I think the important thing is to open up to questions. So, in a time-honoured fashion, if anybody wants to pop their hand up. In the meantime, I'll have a quick look through the chat to see if there's anything immediately kick off with. Chris, I noticed, sorry, Nora, I just noticed you put your hand up as well. You asked a question about fixing tenant and leaseholder energy prices for 10 to 15 years. That's a fair question. And it would be a lie to say that all of the current club members thought that throwing in housing tariffs was sensible. I mean, I think the tenant tariffs themselves wouldn't be in the mix. It would be the communal areas, wouldn't it? But that does still require a Section 25 consultation, I understand. You can tell I don't do housing.
So actually, to add to that, Chris, housing is a really interesting one that you've picked up straight away. It was a kind of hot topic of discussion because there's lots of different types of housing energy as well. So within that category, there were various subcategories. It's a bit of a dumbing down, to be honest. But the interesting thing is, logistically, it's possible to do, but politically, it's also something that you need to go back to people within your council and consult on, because it's easy to fill out Section 25 form, but do you want to? Because you've got to be confident that this is a good thing for your council members to be signed up to, which is why, to Chris's point, like the communal areas feels like a really good compromise, because that's something that the council can take responsibility for. Not, what you don't want is to pass this risk on to maybe consumers, even though I should emphasize it is a price hedge, so it's a risk within the fact that you've not done a PPA before, but it's actually overall it is more likely than not to be a benefit. There's just a small chance that it will it's something that you don't want to put onto your residents.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, it was definitely an area of discussion, and I think on balance most of us agreed things like street lighting, get it in there, that's a nice fixed load. Most corporate assets, although not all, because we're all shrinking our estates, but predominantly get that in there. Leisure centres became a point of discussion, housing is a point of discussion, schools are a point of discussion, but probably there's a bit more confidence about schools now than there used to be. But yeah, it's not by any means certain that each council would do the same as each other, that's for sure. It depends on the political appetite.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think that's it. I think corporately it's much easier to square if it works out that you're paying slightly over the odds in a few years' time, because you can kind of point to the green credentials. But obviously, if you've got people in fuel poverty on your estates that are paying over the odds, then it's difficult. And yeah, taking your point, Helen, I mean, all of the communal lighting landlords does get recharged to tenants and leaseholders as well. So we would have to answer to those annually. But not to say it wouldn't outperform, obviously, the wholesale market in general, but it's always carries more of an element of risk. And it's just, I think previously we've been told flexible is the way to go, don't put all your chips in one basket. But Chris obviously replied saying, well, it's only a small percentage of your overall kind of basket as such in the short term anyway, so it's not buying it all in one way.
And it highlights an interesting point, because I think, Chris and Ashwin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that in some councils' case, energy wasn't charged back. So sometimes there were different treatments of categories, which meant that councils had a bigger risk appetite for. It was actually often the logic behind some councils saying, yes, we'll include this in green or at least amber and not red. And that's what's been interesting to see from the strategy portion of the work. It's something that everyone needs to be aware of, and what discussions to be having, but then you have to take it back, and every council is different, but the club structure allows for differences, so that is not something to be worried about. You can all have different risk appetites and it can still work really well. You just don't include that category or proportion in your total.
Nora.
Yeah, thanks. That was a very interesting presentation. I have one quick question on the contract structure for a virtual PPA. So I understand that all the boroughs, if they participate in a virtual PPA, would retain autonomy on their electricity supply arrangement. They'll stay with the same suppliers. So nothing has to change on that front. But then when it comes to the PPA contracts, do they then sign individual contracts with the generator, or is it one PPA contract that then everybody signs? Because obviously, as I was saying, we're looking at GLA group PPA, which means it's not just the GLA, it's the GLA, Met, Police, London Fire Brigade, TfL possibly, and others. So I think, for us, it's mostly the governance and contract structure. That's one of the key challenges in terms of getting this off the ground. And we've been pushing on the physical PPA option, and that's what we've been focusing on over the past year. But I would be interested in understanding a bit more whether virtual PPAs offer more flexibility on that front, if you can have single contracts for each participating organization, or individual contracts, or if you need one big contract for which everyone signs.
Yeah. Helen, what's the norm?
Oh yes. So essentially, we recommend that there is a champion for the group who would, sort of up until the point of negotiating the actual contract, you sort of make decisions together. It's very consultative, but actually at the contract stage, it's very helpful just to have one person designing the contract. You agree sort of the main terms, but the details, frankly, one person needs to do, but so they'll take ownership of it. But then at the end, once it's finalized, everyone takes the same contract, and then basically the only thing that is different is the volume. And it does, in fact, it doesn't, you could take all, in theory, identical volumes, but it probably won't happen that way, just because of the different risk appetites as discussed. So everyone can sign for a different portion, but it will be one project and it will be one T's and C's attached.
But it's individual contract for differences.
Yes.
They're just replicas, like you say, with the figures being different in each.
Exactly, and that's why you can keep your own energy suppliers, and it's all very easy, because the physical is the back-to-back. One of the contracts has to be identical because it's got to be with the same retail supplier, and that's where it gets complicated with multiple people, because then you have to switch over you have to agree which supplier to switch to, and then everyone has to switch. So it's possible. Phil's done every structure under the sun. So, if you want to do it, the path's been paved. It just might be more of a headache. And the danger is that the more of a headache it is, less likely it is actually to get signed. So, it's a trade-off.
Yeah. And just before I come back to the chat and try and answer a few more questions. So the thing that is worth, hopefully we can get over as clearly as possible. Virtual PPA looks to be the simplest structure. It looks to be pretty much the market dominant product. So I understand at the moment. Now things change over time, but at the moment that's the case. There is a lot of nervousness amongst the Society of London Treasurers, the climate group within the Society of London Treasurers, and in amongst council officers generally, that holding a derivative, and I've tried to put this in the chat to explain the virtual VPA is a derivative. Holding a derivative, which is a financial instrument on councils' balance sheets, there are extreme opinions on it. Some people say it may not be allowed at all. Some people say it could be more trouble than it's worth. Some people say it's just unprecedented. And so we need to work hard as a group to try and get CIPFA to issue clear advice to local government on what is or isn't allowed. And until we can get that out of CIPFA, because at the moment they just stay quiet and say, yeah, it's probably all right, which is not good enough. So we need to get them to try and actually write something out to people so that we know whether or not this is a viable option. So that is the biggest obstacle. Now, Manchester, they've signed a virtual PPA, so they've set a precedent, but that doesn't mean that they've got cast iron advice from CIPFA. They've just chosen to go for it and take the risk. And we've been talking to them, and we've introduced them to London Treasurers as well. But I just wanted that to be clear. A virtual PPA is more complicated to put together, but doesn't have that accountancy risk, ultimately, at the end of the day. So a couple of questions. I may not get them in order. Islington, I think we've answered the question about Islington, or Ashwin has. Sorry, I did see something earlier. No, I can't find it, so it may well have been answered. I thought I saw another question from you, Louise. I wonder if you could remind me what you asked. I did see a couple. You asked about headings being misaligned.
I'm so sorry. Schoolboy error. We'll correct that, I promise.
Okay, Louis, did you have another question apart from communal areas being recharged? I think we've answered that. Islington, we've answered. Headings, we've answered. I think we're there. So is there anything else, I guess, if I have answered everything? Is there anything else from anybody that they want to ask?
I was just going to suggest, if we do have a bit of time, maybe Chris, if you could share your experience, or I mean, I'm happy to also say who I think it would be useful to align internally if you're having these kind of initial conversations, just to make sure that you get the ball rolling as soon as you can, because you know there's a lot of people to convince that this is a good idea and to educate. It definitely is a good idea, but you know that it's just you've got to bring so many different people along with you. So maybe it's a useful thing to just consider what, for example, meetings you need to put next in the diary and with who.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. That's a good point, Helen. I think that the key lesson that we've learned from the club is we didn't engage with senior enough people early enough, and they are now raising concerns, completely legitimate concerns, but it's quite it's after we've been talking about it for 18 months. So getting your finance teams at a senior, section 151 or deputy level is really, really key. They should be hearing about this through the Society of London Treasurers now, so it shouldn't be a surprise, but talking to them about this, either contract, physical or virtual, still requires a long-term commitment, fixed price, which could go either way. And so those risks are real. It could be that the green characteristics and the additionality is enough for members to be comfortable with, but that's a genuine risk. I think procurement, senior people in procurement also need to be involved. So they need to know that there won't just be the procurement of a PPA. There's almost certainly going to be the procurement of consultants and legal advice to get to the point that a procurement can start. So they need to be on board and comfortable. I would say your governance teams is key as well, so that you can roadmap out your approvals for the initial consultancy advice and legal support, but also getting to the point that you're going to have a cabinet decision to enter into a PPA. So all of that stuff we have kind of learned the hard way, and we still haven't got it right in the club. So there's no harm in an informal conversation, I would say, and there's no harm in chat GPT in your way to understanding PPAs in more detail, because it is all there and there's some quite useful resource. In fact, I will share one of the clearest explanations for PPA with this in this chat after this, because there's nothing wrong with what you've said, Helen, but it's always nice to read it in different ways, isn't it? And then the understanding just develops.
Yeah, I
so that's a good shout. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, and there's no hands up, and I haven't missed anything else in the chat, I hope that was helpful. And